Hello and welcome back to Heavy Subjects Podcast. I'm Ruben. That's Reagan.
Oh,
Yeah, so what are we going to talk about today, Reagan? What's the plan? What's on the agenda? If your T-shirt hasn't already given it away.
well, my sneaky hint. I thought it'd be appropriate T-shirt for our third video. Guys, we're talking about Evile.
Evile, yes.
Evile.
So who are Evile?
Evile. So Evile are a thrash metal band from, or as I say, a new wave of thrash metal band from Huddersfield, Yorkshire.
Yes.
I would say they're probably the most important band for the new wave of thrash movement. However, that's debatable. I do see that. I feel like it's the band that it was the band that got me into the new wave genre personally. So,
and it was one of the first bands I think we kind of bonded over. I mean, the big one for us too, which we will talk about when we get to new metal, is Slipknot, right?
Yeah.
I think, but yeah, like when I first met you, I remember the very first conversation we had, which was, "Oh, you like metal, do you?" And I said, "Yeah, I like stuff like Metallica." And you were like, "Oh, you should listen to Evile." And I was like, "Evile? Who's that?" I remember, being around your place, listening to Evile together, watching that documentary. I think it was the Infected Nations documentary. With,
I had the DVD that came with the CD.
With the song that didn't make it to the album. Do you remember that one?
Yeah. I had to rewatch those for this video, so perfect stuff there. Yeah, so many funny things from those two documentaries, you could say, of the band. Beautiful.
So they're from Huddersfield. Have you been to Huddersfield?
Once in my entire life. Once.
Yeah, I went through there on a bus on my way to Leeds.
Yeah, makes sense. I actually went in Huddersfield, though. I didn't drive in it. I actually went inside once.
Right.
It's a bit off-topic story, but I will mention it briefly. Essentially, at the time, I was living in Leeds. I know, rest in peace for that one, especially in East End Park, probably one of the worst areas. But that aside, my dog, Droopy, I know, great name for the dog, but my dad named him. Droopy ran away accidentally because I think he got through the gate somehow. I can't remember exactly because I was a kid. And as a result, we couldn't find him, and because he was chipped. We got a message in the mail saying that he's been taken to I don't know what you call it, like a kennel pound type of thing,
like a shelter.
Shelter, yeah, somewhere where they would keep abandoned or dogs that have gone missing. I don't know exactly the name because it was years ago, but it was in Huddersfield, so we had to go all the way to Huddersfield to grab him. So that's my only experience of the place.
Man. Yeah, I've only really been up to the north once properly. I personally went up, because I went to Leeds, because my mate was living there, so I went up for a weekend. But I saw like the nice bit, like the student bit of Leeds, and I thought it was really nice.
Yeah, I lived in East End Park, which is notoriously fucking bad for crime. Like, no word of a lie, I got attacked multiple times physically.
Man.
And I mean, like, I got attacked by groups of people, not just a person. It's really horrible, and never go there.
Okay, I remember that then, jeez.
Anyway, personal stories aside, we should go into Evile. I feel like before we go on to the main bread and butter, which would be Enter the Grave sort of time, and onwards, we should discuss maybe a little bit of background of the band. I feel like that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. So they were a covers band first, weren't they?
Yeah, I think they did a lot of primarily, I think it was Metallica. I think I remember hearing about the band when they were doing covers. It was originally, I think Matt and Ben kind of started it because they were friends from school, and then all joined as lead guitarists not long after due to picking it up relatively quick. If I'm wrong on that, old Drake, you can comment in the section and scold me. Feel free.
Yeah.
um,
So Matt Drake and Old Drake, obviously brothers.
yes.
Jumping ahead a bit, but now Old Drake and Ben Carter, who's an amazing drummer, they're the only members of the original lineup still in the band, aren't they?
Yes, because Mike Alexander not long joined when they put an ad, if I remember correctly, in the local guitar store or something, and then he responded because they were looking for a bassist influenced by bands like Metallica, Sepultura, and so forth. So that worked out quite well for them. And that's when they became the full band. They played their first ever show at Halifax. And I read on Wikipedia this is I thought it was funny, where an audience member apparently had a brick thrown at their face by one of the area locals.
Yeah, I read that as well.
Yeah. There you go. I have to just mention that one.
We laugh, but that is horrible.
It's horrible. You should never
Especially
ever do that to anyone.
when you think it was probably because he was dressed like in the metal fashion, and you just think obviously we know very well about especially like metal and the goth subcultures.
I think as well,
going into detail, people being attacked by ignorant people. If you're that sort of person, fuck you. You are less than human.
You're a horrible human being, and you should go.
You're not a human being.
You need to reflect a lot of your life if you want to tag someone for what they look like or do. I feel like that time frame is where there was a lot of it, that mid-2000s, I think, because a lot of the scenes back then were still quite new and people were still a bit ignorant towards them. I mean, being attacked myself for them during that era, it happens. But I feel like it's a bit more accepted now, which is great. I think people are more used to the alternative lifestyles now, which is a great thing. So if you are someone who wants to throw a brick at someone at their face for that reason, you're a prick. Hopefully the person who had the brick thrown at them recovered well.
Yeah.
I was more laughing, to be honest, at the idea of performing and then someone gets a brick thrown at them out of nowhere. I can't imagine that happening. Where did
the brick come from?
It'll be terrifying.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we've kind of established the general building, like the proto of Evile building, and then once they did kind of form properly, around about 2004 to 6, they kind of stopped dedicating themselves to covers and started doing it towards started creating original material, and I feel like that's where Evile really kind of took shape.
Definitely. So I think they did like a demo or something before. Most bands do kind of do like demos, don't they? It's just so they have something to show people. This is what we sound like, other than just the obvious thing you should do is go and see them. If you have a local band who haven't recorded anything yet, recording is expensive. So go and see them. Go support local bands. Go support local venues.
I think as well, most local bands, it's more money than you get for making one. Like, you have to put a lot of that into it. So
yeah. I think most bands who go and record their first EP or something, because it's a lot easier to do these days than it was. I think most bands I can think of who have gone and away and recorded an EP. I've been in a band who's done it, and I feel like we, as a band, spent so much more money than that band will probably ever make in its entire career.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not easy.
No.
But luckily for Evile, obviously, after the 2 demos, they did end up getting some success. I know it's never really been a full-time job for them on the basis that they never really made a lot of money. I remember Matt saying that in one of his interviews, but generally speaking, it's not enough to kind of make a purely art living on, I would say. But so the first 2 EPs basically made independently by the band was the All Hallows Eve and Hell demo, if I remember correctly.
And so after that, they got signed, right, to I forget the record label now, but they got signed.
Earache.
And Earache, that's it, yeah. Really good label as well, some great bands on Earache. And they were kind of, the label were like, you should do an album. And albums are in. If you're a band, you do an album. That's just how it is. Otherwise, why have we signed you? And so, the band thought, well, let's think about a producer. And apparently, I think it was Matt, was like, wouldn't it be funny if we could get like Flemming Rasmussen or someone who produced Metallica, Ride the Lightning, Master of Puppets, Justice for All. He's done loads of stuff, but apparently Matt emailed him as a joke, and then a few days later, Flemming just went, yeah, all right. Matt was like, what? But they didn't hear anything back from him for a while. And they were like, we need to think about booking studio time. Time's money. And Earache rang up Flemming and said, yo, are you going to do this or not? And Flemming was like, oh, yeah. I was just going to turn up. Yeah, so they went into the studio and recorded.
Yeah, that was the classic moment.
Yeah, and they recorded Enter the Grave.
They did. It was a big moment for them because obviously being signed. I mean, obviously playing with Exodus just before being signed and probably going to Bloodstock open air as well. Because they were and then that led to them being signed and going to Flemming Rasmussen, which so much happened so quickly for them. Like in that sort of time frame, must have been crazy to think at the time.
And they were winning competitions, getting to play at Bloodstock, like you say. I think a lot of it is just they were and they remain that good. They're really, really talented, and even back then, they were just a really tight band. I think regardless of genre, they're just a really good band.
Oh yeah, no, just genre aside, they generally do know their instruments very, very well.
Yeah, and they play together really well as well.
Yeah, like they're very communal. You can just tell they all play well together. What's interesting when you play Bloodstock was, I think Matt said that he never actually did like a Metal to the Masters type of thing or anything like that to actually get into Bloodstock. They just were invited.
Yeah.
To play, because there was them and a few other bands like kind of like Mutant and stuff, just like traveling around the country, like, playing like I know these bands, but like independently trying to kind of gain a following, and Bloodstock kind of got a hold of that idea of them doing it, and they invited them onto the under the tent. I can't remember which one, and then Evile was one headline in the tent, and that's where that's the main thing that got them signed apparently. So there you go, brilliant stuff. But going to Flemming Rasmussen, because we all love Flemming. He's a great producer, and obviously everyone loves Master of Puppets as well. Who doesn't? So this obviously goes into Enter the Grave, and my God, what a debut album from any band. Yeah,
and we'll get on to like what we really think of it, I guess, later on, because we are going to rank. Well, I'm going to rank them. You're going to rank them. We're going to rank Evile's studio albums from our least to most favourite.
Exactly. I would say the same thing, but since I struggle pronouncing my R's, I might come across the wrong way.
Yes, that's for our paid subscribers.
Subscribe to our OnlyFans for the fully exclusive stuff.
Yeah. So, like, in terms of sound, I mean, there's no fucking about. The subgenre that Enter the Grave is thrash metal. If someone said, what genre is it? Oh, it's thrash. Like,
straight up.
Yeah. Doesn't mess about. Almost the entire album is just, it's a fucking train coming at you. It's just straight up thrash the entire 50-odd minutes that it runs for. But like I said in the episode we recorded about New Wave of Thrash, even though it doesn't really ever change styles, there's not a lot of different kind of... it's not a particularly diverse album, but the pacing somehow really, really works. Every song is great on its own. As an album from start to finish, it's fantastic.
Yeah, there's definitely something magical about what they captured within that album.
Yeah.
Like you said, the flow feels great, despite the fact that it's 50 or so minutes long, and it's just pure, unadulterated, thrashed, and that never really lets up. It keeps your attention all the way through, and I feel like that's hard for any thrash band to do, really. So, congrats on them all. And yeah, I mean, some parts you can kind of see how Matt's voice is still kind of developing in the Enter the Grave album, especially when you compare it to the later albums, such as Skull or Five Serpents' Teeth. But despite that, the fact that he put so much effort and just shouted as much as he could to, do the vocals, it kind of shows through, and it kind of comes across quite endearing to a degree. I quite enjoy that. I like to see his process, and I feel like it works. Despite that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's Enter the Grave is definitely where Evile, they were gaining traction, but Enter the Grave was where they went from, really big local band to, they were like, oh, Evile, they're, the top new thrash band that exists, probably in the world.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the new wave of thrash, they are the face of it almost. Well, one of the faces, but probably the biggest. Yeah. And if probably with thrash in general now, due to how much of an impact they made, especially with Enter the Grave, I feel like it's probably up there with Kill Them All in terms of debut albums for thrash bands. I know some people may argue or not, because obviously you could argue that Kill Them All, was very old, and at the time, though it's a bit raw, they were really the only ones properly doing that type of sound. And so, obviously, influentially speaking, Kill Them All probably has more of a say, but I do genuinely feel that it's up there with that type of album.
Yeah, I completely agree. As an album, Enter the Grave is very emblematic and representative of thrash. If that kind of sound they're coming out, it's almost like, what if a band? It's like old school thrash, but with modern production. That's the way I'd kind of describe it.
Actually, I think.
Yeah, that's right. It doesn't feel like they're looking backwards. It definitely feels like they're like, no, we're a modern band with modern techniques and modern production, modern mastering and mixing. But I think those other new wave bands, they were just going, we don't want to play thrash as a gimmick. We don't want to be looking back and being like, oh, we're going to stay in this box from the 80s. And it's like, no, we just want to write good metal, and it just happens to be thrash. That's the impression I get with that first Evile record.
I think I know what you mean, because sometimes Evile has this sort of curse of being affiliated with people like Metallica, which isn't necessarily a bad thing in itself, but I think, especially from especially from outsiders where they don't really know it very well, that whenever they hear thrash, they just think of Metallica, and then that's it. Yeah. But when you really listen to it, you can actually see that, no, they have their own form of it. They've done their own thing with thrash and really took it in their own direction, and I feel that's definitely sometimes overshadowed, but definitely worth pointing out. And yeah, you can definitely tell where their influences come from, like Exodus, like Annihilator, like Metallica, and so forth, especially other ones like Sepultura. But they did do their own thing with it, and I think that's great. But at the same time, kind of giving a homage to the 80s thrash, but with a modern twist. Like, obviously, you can tell where things like First Blood, comes from Rambo, and Killer from the Deep really feels like it stems from like Jaws, and even though that's technically 70s, but it was popular in the 80s. And Babe in Blood, even that has feelings of 80s because of it's based on Countess Bathory, which kind of gives you feelings of like Venom, like early Venom and stuff. And so all great songs and stuff, but I just feel that they do have their own unique blend going on, and that just happens to be overshadowed, sadly. Such a good process of an album whenever I look at how they record it, it's just magical. It actually was the reason why I even started a thrash band, this album. Because obviously it's kind of ironic that they probably heard something like Ride the Lightning and then thought that's going to make me want to do this. And then they made it, and now I'm listening to that when I was about 13 thinking, I want to do this, so I'm going to do the same thing. And I did. I started a thrash band because of the influence of this album. So
there you go. So
there you go.
Potentially your entire career.
Potentially. I mean, it's probably interesting from their perspective because they're probably not realising that they're doing the same thing to people like me as the people like Metallica did to them.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Music's such a powerful thing.
Very much so. It was also interesting because when I got into Evile, Enter the Grave was if you don't include the 2 EPs from before, Enter the Grave was still the only album they had.
Right, okay. So you've been there pretty much from the beginning then.
Oh, well, I don't know if you want to say the beginning, because technically I got into them early 2009.
Okay, alright.
So it was before Infected Nations, but not long, I would say, before Infected Nations. However, I got into them before it came out. So it was actually because of I'll actually say how I got into them, which was there was a CD in Metal Hammer. I just bought a random Metal Hammer magazine because I was just getting into metal at the time, and it had a CD on there of just underground sort of extreme metal bands in general. One of the songs was Evile's "We Who Are About to Die," and that's the first song of theirs I heard. So I listened to that, really enjoyed it. It was the song on the whole album. It was the one that put it out to me the most. It was that riff with not the first part with the clean, but when it comes in with the slow but heavy intro, and it just hit so well that I just went, "This is amazing," and I listened to it a lot. And then I went on YouTube and started listening to other ones, such as Thrasher, obviously with the video, because that was the more popular one technically. And then I managed to buy the album, then listen to the album all the way through. It was just a really big moment for me getting into more extreme forms of metal, stemming away from just the surface level like Slipknot and stuff. Which no offense to them, they're great, but just kind of like going further with it. If that makes sense. So there you go. Evile's Enter the Grave. I don't know if you want to add any more before we head on to the next one.
So I was just going to say, it's interesting because I didn't realise that you'd been listening since they only had one album. So when every new album came out, you were there to sort of hear it first, and I'm really interested to hear what your reactions were like as opposed to mine, because now I've only very recently listened to every album by them, so I can just go, oh, they have 6 albums. I'd already heard Enter the Grave a few times, but I can sit now and go like, oh, all 6 albums are here. I don't have to wait 2 years for the new one. I can just listen to all 6 in one day if I really want to. I took a couple of days to do it, but so I don't know, for me, my idea of what Evile sound like is probably a lot more varied than you in 2009 going, well, I only know Enter the Grave. That's the only album they've done, so I don't know what they're going to do next. So going on to the next album, which is Infected Nations, as someone who had only heard Enter the Grave, which is pretty much just fast, straight up thrash the whole time, Infected Nations a little bit of a different direction. So what was your reaction when that album came out in 2009?
Well, I'm gonna have to try and remember if it's like 15 years ago now, but
Avatar came out 15 years ago.
Obviously, no offense to people with it. I know it's a horrible disease. So going back to when it was first released, it was released on 21st of September 2009, and the reason why I've always remembered that date is because it's the date that I moved to the city I'm currently living in, and I have been since. So ironically, it's also tied to another significant event in my life, so that always kind of reminded me of the album almost. But so I didn't actually buy the album on the day it came out. I bought the album on the 5th of the. I think it was the same day Mike died.
Wow.
I bought the album, and I think I didn't even know he died until after I bought it, which was also a bit odd. I don't know. Take that as you will. Obviously, I will go into Mike Alexander's death in soon, but I'll talk about my initial reaction to the album first. I actually really liked it. I think my initial reaction is it felt new. Obviously, kind of the production was different. Now they have Russ Russell doing new production for them.
He produced Jimmy Borgir, hadn't he?
Yeah, Demi Borgir and other quite big hands, actually, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so I was like, I like the new direction. You know, the production's a bit different. I can see how Matt's voice has changed. There's a little bit more melody going on. He's not just shouting completely, which isn't necessarily a good or bad thing in itself. Like, I think both were great for those reasons, but it's just that little bit of a different direction they were heading, but kind of still staying Evile at the same time. Like, it didn't feel like they weren't Evile anymore. It didn't feel like they weren't doing thrash anymore. It still felt like straight up thrash that was played really well. But I could just see a progression of the band, which was quite nice at the time.
Yeah, like it's for me, it felt a bit more like it's a bit more kind of mid-tempo than Enter the Grave. This album, Infected Nations, which I always get confused with that because the album is Infected Nations and the song is Infected Nation. It's one of those awkward, like, it's a title track, but it's not at the same time. Like Tool, the album's called Anima, the song is called Enema. It's really annoying. But, yeah, it's a bit more kind of mid-tempo, a bit more kind of spacious, I guess, than Enter the Grave. And on the one hand, that could be seen as a little bit disappointing to some. But, you know, I'm glad they didn't just put out Enter the Grave Part 2.
Yeah, no,
they went with a different producer and a different kind of approach, and they were like, we don't just want to do the same thing again. And like Metallica, I completely get when people go, that stuff Metallica did after the early 90s, where it's not thrash anymore, is shit. It's not thrash. I understand people being like that because it's not the music they love. But I kind of feel like, well, wouldn't you rather they evolve and sound different, or are you just going to be AC/DC and put out the same album like 20 times?
Yeah, I agree. I do feel that this album has its own unique things compared to Enter the Grave that makes it stand out more though as well. Because yeah, it's a bit more mid-tempo at times, but there's also times where it does go fast and heavy. And you know, yeah, maybe adding, you know, when I think of like Now Demolition or something, which is a bit more of a flow mid-tempo song, but it still stays heavy and catchy at the same time. The drum beat to that's fantastic, and you know, Genocide. It's probably my favorite song on the album. Is Genocide actually? I think that song on the album. Sorry, really, for some reason, it's the main one that poked out to me. Is that riff after the intro just really got me grooving. It felt a bit more groovy. You know, there was obviously some more influences for bands like Pantera and stuff, because I know Mike and Ben were really into those types of groove metal bands, and obviously. Still having the old Sepultura vibe. So I kind of felt like they were kind of mix sort of like older Sepultura, like, you know, think Beneath the Veins and stuff like that, but kind of mixing it more with Pantera at the same time. I felt like it was a good blend of it though. Obviously, I don't know if that's exactly what they were heading for. This is what I felt when I was listening to it. At the time, still to this day. So go on.
I was just saying that's the impression you get. I agree with your song choices. Those are some great tracks for the album. I love the title track. It's one of the first Evile songs I ever heard. I saw them do it live and it's epic. I really like, is it Nosophoros? Yeah, Nosophoros. That's probably my favourite track personally. I just like the aggression.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember how you pronounce it. Nosophoros, is it? Nosophoros? I know it's weird because it's a Greek word, isn't it?
It's track 3. It's that one.
That one, yeah. It's I think it means disease bearer in Greek, and it's I think it's the Anglican translation was Nosferatu.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah, because the song's about vampires, so that makes sense. But yeah, no, it's a great song. I did really like that one, so I do definitely agree with you. And Infected Nations is a great opener for an album, and genuinely just a song.
Um,
So I feel like we should go into the death of Mike Alexander now that we've
yeah.
mentioned the album.
It's the second and final album that he appears on because he sadly passed away very not long after the album came out. Right, they were on tour when it happened, I think.
Yeah, it was. I wasn't. Yeah, it was like right after the album was released, and I think they were in Sweden at the time.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember. I think I'm kind of feeling it's the 5th of October. You know what? I should Google this just to be sure, because I don't want to get it wrong for anyone watching. Because obviously I was really sad when it happened. Oh yeah, I was right. It is the 5th of October. He died.
right.
Okay, so and that was the day I actually bought the album. I remembered it correctly. So again, interesting. But yeah, it was very weird for them, I imagine, because one, he's being so young. Well, he was 32, and it was a very quick, sudden death. And it was, I know it was a pulmonary embolism, which is what my mother died of. And looking at it, it is a very scary illness because it's so sudden. It's like there's no warning sometimes. It's just like that person looks normal. You wouldn't even think they were about to die, and then suddenly they drop.
Yeah.
And it's so like shocking because there's no preparation for anything like that. Especially, like I said, with someone being so young, like Mike in his early 30s, you just wouldn't expect someone at 32 just to suddenly drop dead. So it was so difficult for them. I can imagine it is anyway, like because I know they've expressed that. So, the amount of like confusion in their heads. So, imagine them. I remember Matt talking about them coming back from the tour, going back home with trying to move Mike's body back home. Like that's so. I just can't imagine, honestly. Yeah. And I was really devastated when I found out at the time because I got into them before he died. So to me, it was a bit of a shock because I was getting really into them. So I used to, you remember watching the video of Mike in the documentary doing Enter the Grave and everything. And he seemed like a really nice guy. So, watching that a few times and finding out he died, I just felt a bit like, oh, the world's lost a very, kind soul, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah, taken way too soon, and he very likely had so much more left to give.
I think the only solace you can really find in any way was he, according to Matt, if I remember correctly, he said Mike wanted to create something that his daughter would be proud of, and that was his main sort of motivation for doing it. And I feel like he achieved that. So I feel like that's something to have.
I absolutely agree. I think, there's a legacy for her to, she can listen to her dad and she can, she can see like, oh, he made some cool music and he meant a lot to a lot of people.
For sure.
Yeah.
It was a sad moment. But, I mean, obviously, when they did replace Mike eventually with Joel, because I was a bit unsure at the time, because at the time when he died, obviously the main sadness was towards his death, but it was also a bit like floating at the time. Like I always remember thinking, like, oh no, are they going to stop? Because that's the first thing I thought when I feel like a big one of the friends, a big part of the band, goes. Did he keep going? So for a bit of time, I didn't even know what they were going to do until they officially said they got Joel and they keep going, with Joel.
Yeah,
which is fine. And Joel is a great bassist. So there was a bit of uncertainty as well going on. But at the same time, he left a great legacy, and I take solace in that. So I feel like. Before we move from Infected Nations, I did want to mention one more thing, as well as Michael Sanders' death, was the album artwork. It's fantastic.
Oh, yeah, cool. I can't believe I didn't think to mention that. Yeah, the artwork's absolutely amazing. It's stunning to look at. Enter the Grave had a great cover, but I think the Infected Nations cover is great in a different way. It's very detailed. It's almost like a death metal cover.
Yeah, well, it was made by Michael. Was it Michael Whelan? What's his name? The one who did Course of Death by Obituary. It's the same guy.
Yeah, legendary artist.
Yes, definitely. I think it was Stephen King's novels as well and stuff like that. But yeah, you can see that he did a really good job. I think they both capture different feelings. Like, the Affected Nation artwork really does represent the album well. Like, I feel like he did a good job with that, and it does feel like that apocalyptic feel. But Enter the Grave, the album cover of that, did feel interesting, because when looking at the album cover of Enter the Grave, it felt like what's the word? Is a thalassophobia? When like big things or like wild things. It felt a bit like that, because there's just one small person in this giant sort of hellish, oversized world falling down, and it felt a bit like, like when I was looking at it, especially first time I saw it. So I feel like they both captured the feelings of each album relatively well.
And the thing with the Infected Nations cover as well, just looking at Michael White and what else he's done. Do you remember in the very first, or the second episode, we were talking about the band Kirith Ungol with their artwork, and we were both going, look how cool it is. It's the same artist. I've literally just found out it's the same guy.
Oh, really? I didn't even know that. I mean, it makes sense. So, well done to him. He's a fantastic artist. Anyway, just want to say rest in peace to Mike. Forever be an influence on me, musically especially. So, moving on from that, I would like to go into Five Serpents' Teeth, unless you want to add anything else to the Affected Nations.
I don't think so. I think anything else I want to add, I'll talk about when I place it somewhere in my ranking of their albums. But yeah, let's talk about Five Serpents' Teeth.
What's your opinion?
Well, I'll talk more about my opinion when I kind of go, this is going to be, it'll be number whatever it is in my list. It's a bit more of a different kind of, I feel like the mid-tempo elements of Infected Nations, they really kind of double down on this one, and it's a bit more accessible again than than that album was. Cult is a banger, right? That's a good track.
I think Cult was a very much a good single for the band, commercially speaking, because it's a simple but hard-hitting song, and I feel like a lot of people liked it for that reason.
So when it first came out, because at this point, 2011, right? This came out, so you were like, okay, new Evile, let's go. First album without Mike. Let's see what it sounds like. What was your reaction when you first heard Five Serpents' Teeth the first time?
So I actually remember listening to it because, I was on YouTube, and Matt, I don't know if it was channel it was, but it was one of the channels of Evile, maybe like either the label or the Evile channel itself. But Matt made a video, and I was like, "Oh, Matt's made a video. Let's have it." And it had the caption "new album," and I was like, "Yes," like that type of thing. 2 years since Infected Nations, so I watched the video. They said it's been released. I don't know if they said if it was released or it was about to be released. It was one or the other, and I got excited. So I waited till the day it was released and actually got the CD on the day to put in my hi-fi to give it a go listen to. So that was an exciting moment for me. So my first reaction to it, obviously, first one with Joel, so I was a bit like, let's see how this goes. And Joel, he did a really good job. Like, he really integrated with the band very well. But at the same time, I still felt like Mike was still in the band, despite the fact he's no longer in there. Especially with songs like In Memoriam, when you think about it, because the bass intro was, if I remember correctly, though, I'm not sure it was something that Mike actually written himself. What's that, sorry?
It was the bass riff he'd play during soundtracks at shows, right?
Yeah, I think I remember hearing someone say that. I'm not sure if it's completely true, so if anyone's aware that's not the case, put it in the comments, but I remember, I think it was riff he played and sound checks. I've heard in the grapevine. So, but either way, it did feel like he was still there with the album, even though he wasn't there in person, if you know what I mean. Outside of that, though, it was interesting hearing the ballad, because obviously I didn't expect Evile to do a ballad, because at the time they didn't feel like a band that would do one.
Yeah.
Not a bad thing. It's just it was a surprise to me in Memoriam, but at the same time, the guitar is so fucking powerful in that song. Like, I know they had Matt and Paul's dad come in to help with the guitar during that song, but wow, it was fantastic. Powerful guitars. I can hear the emotion in the music. It was very moving, but outside of that, the heaviness was still there. I think of Eternal Empire. I remember first hearing that, and that riff just hit perfectly. I think that was the song that hit the most. I felt when I first listened to it. I think there was two distinct points. I think it was the main riff to Eternal Empire, and then there was the breakdown to In Dreams of Terror, and then the solo guitars within Memoriam was the first things that pointed out to me that I liked the most about the album. But then a few more re-listens later, I got into the idea of I like the way Matt's voice was going in this sort of more melodic direction, which was great. A lot more layers in his vocals. So again, I feel that this album really, I wasn't sure what to expect, but when I did listen to it, I was very satisfied with what they did.
Okay. And when did you first see Evile? Was it around the Infected Nations era, or was it after then?
It was just after. It was late 2011. I can't remember exactly what month. And If I Were Serpent's Teeth was already released at this point.
Okay, so it's that kind of cycle then.
Yeah, it was not. Yeah, it was the first three albums, so there was only songs. When I saw them, there was only songs from those three, which were great. I haven't seen them since, sadly, which we were going for you when you saw them.
Yeah.
Sadly, I didn't get to see Mike. I was only, a bit slight regret of mine, never getting to see them while Mike was still in the band, but I'm kind of glad I still saw them while Matt was the vocalist, because he's an excellent vocalist.
Yeah.
It was a great set, though, and they did a really good job. Amazing live. It put into perspective how good they are as musicians, and getting to meet the band. I was only 15 at the time and really into them, so it was a big moment for me. This 15-year-old fanboy. I hope I wasn't too annoying. But they were really nice. I'll spent about 5 minutes running around trying to find a pen for me to sign my ticket. So I felt bad for him, but he dedicated himself to that, so I've always appreciated that. And Ben, obviously, they all signed it for me. Meeting Ben and then Joel. And Matt didn't talk too much because he had he blew his voice out a bit. So
okay. Right.
bad for him. But and obviously they are busy trying to do things as well, so I didn't want to be too annoying. But I did spend half an hour, 45 minutes waiting in the back just to see them. So I was, I put in the time and effort. But they were great. I enjoyed them. Really nice guys, all of them. So I definitely will say that. It was a really good moment for me. I was very happy.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Anyway, go back to the album. What do you want to say about Five Serpent's Teeth?
I mean, like I said, when I get to ranking them at the end, I'll talk about how much I did or didn't like it. I do think it's a bit of a step down from the first two records.
Okay.
Without giving too much of my true opinion away, I think like I said, it's a bit more accessible. I'm not one of those guys who's like, oh, if you make more accessible music, then you're not metal, you're lame or whatever. It's got its moments. It's got its very powerful moments. Like you say, In Memoriam, the track for Mike is incredible. I don't know. I kind of feel like it's. I appreciate the band are evolving at this point, but I'm not necessarily sure if it was a better direction for them. Um, yeah, a bit more kind of. A lot of the adrenaline and aggression of the first two records is kind of missing, I think, a bit on this one.
Yeah,
It's not a bad
I
album.
agree.
I just think it's
When,
a bit like, oh,
also,
okay, it's not as good as the first two.
to be honest, I did think that myself. I think the first time I listened to it, I wasn't really trying to compare it. I was trying to see it as entity in itself, so I did really enjoy it. Obviously, I could be blinded a little bit by nostalgic too, because it was an album just to a lot when I was young. However, I remember thinking after getting used to the album, I did kind of think to myself, if I had to rank the three albums, I would say it's my least out of the three.
Sure. Sure.
I did feel that. I mean, I understand to a degree, maybe because of the trepidations and the changes the band went through. It was probably they were trying to find a footing a bit more. So I get that, but it does feel it didn't quite have what the other two had. However, at the same time, I think in itself, I still really enjoy listening to it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Is there anything else you want to add about Five Serpents' Teeth before we move on to the next one?
No, I'm pretty happy about what I've mentioned, and yeah, it was I really I feel like I've said everything I need to say, so we should do Departure from good old Five Serpents to Skull.
Yeah. So, same producer again. I mean, it's interesting to note as well, from Infected Nations to Skull, it's Russ Russell producing all three albums.
Yes. Yeah.
So moving on then, I guess, from Five Serpents' Teeth, 2013. This is around about the time I first met you, about a year after I first met you, I think. And
yeah. Well.
so Skull comes out, and you're like, oh, a new Evile record. And what kind of happened? Did you go and buy it when it came out? Do you remember the hype building up towards it?
It didn't. I lost my hi-fi at the time, so I didn't have a way to listen to it. So I didn't actually end up buying the CD. Sorry, guys. I broke my tradition. So I just heard it on the internet. I know, a sellout, right? I'm sorry, but I did enjoy it. I really enjoyed when they released. I don't remember the first time they released before it came out. Was it Underworld? Is that the name of the song? I can't remember the name. Yeah,
The opening track.
Yeah, it is Underworld. Yeah, they made a lyric video for Underworld, and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." I enjoyed it. It made me a bit excited for the rest of the album. And then I remember the album coming out, and I was like, "Nice." It felt a bit more. It did feel a bit more Five Serpents' Teeth alike, but I feel like they had a bit more groove elements to it, like especially with certain songs. Like,
yeah.
Was it Outsider that had the felt like it was influenced by the Pantera. So I really enjoyed it. It has a really nice flow. However, I don't know. I don't want to give too much of my opinion, but there's a similar opinion here. I feel with Skull, and it's the same with Five Serpents. But I did really enjoy Head of the Demon to the point where I actually learned and did a video series on my channel of me teaching how to play it. However, I'm pretty certain I got parts of it wrong because I was trying to learn by ear, and I was like 17 and still learning. So if anyone who has seen that video is now watching this video, I apologise if it's not the greatest. However, if you want me to update it, feel free to angrily tell me in the comments. But so that was my favourite one on the album, though, if you want my opinion on it.
So I don't want to give too much away. I will say that I really, really liked it. I felt that it kind of took the elements from Five Serpents' Teeth that worked, and it feels a bit more diverse and a bit more interesting. And I really like how some of the aggression from Enter the Grave and the speed and the adrenaline is back. And there's some like the closing track, New Truths, Old Lies, it's it fucking goes, doesn't it? Like, it's there's some really quick riffs on this album.
Yeah, there's some decent riffs for sure.
I thought, it's a bit more of a step back in the right direction, I felt, for the band at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's bittersweet, isn't it? Because it would end up being the final album with Matt Drake on vocals. And at the time, we all thought it was the last album with Ol as well.
Yeah, that is true. It was a weird moment for Evile, just sort of after Skull. I felt, there's a lot of it was weird because it was a bit bittersweet because I was thinking when Ol left that, oh no, Ol's leaving, which I understood why at the time because I think he was about to become a father and he was unsure about things. So yeah, fair enough. But I was like, oh no, like how is it going to work? How is it going to go now that Ol is not in it? But then suddenly Ol came back, and then Matt left right after. And I was getting to a point, kind of weird, because I was getting to a point because they hadn't really done much after Skull due to changes in the band.
Yeah,
I was kind of getting used to just those albums and not really having any others. And then suddenly, I remember the day Matt left because Matt did a Facebook post about it, and I saw a post. Because I was like, oh, Ol's back. I was like, oh, finally, I might get a new Evile album now. And then Matt left. I was like, oh no, where are we going to go now? And then eventually, Ol took over as vocalist, and I was really surprised that Ol did the vocals.
Yeah.
I never really saw him as a vocalist before. That was a big difference for me. I always just saw him as a guitarist. Like, he's a phenomenally talented guitarist, don't get me wrong, but I never looked at him as a singer until he started doing it, really.
Yeah. So I think before we get on to, I guess, their big comeback, Old Drake leaves, and anyone in their right mind, I wouldn't blame them if they thought, well, this band are done now. They're fucked. And they didn't really do anything. There was an 8-year gap between Skull and their next album that will come out. So, Ol left. Did you listen to his solo album, Old Rake? Just going off on a tangent. Have you heard it?
Yeah, I listened to it when it came out, actually. Which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, do you want my one-sentence review of it?
Yeah.
He's a really good guitarist.
Yeah, it's like, if you want shredded wheat, go straight for it,
No, I like that. That's good.
Thank you. Yeah, shredded for breakfast, my lads.
Get that fibre in, yeah. It's a very fibrous record. I think it's pretty cool that he managed to get a guitarist like Gary Holt to play on it. That's pretty fucking good. Gary Holt is... If someone said, I think Gary Holt's the most talented thrash guitarist ever, I'd be like, you're probably right. He's immense.
Well, he's up there, definitely.
Yeah.
I don't think that there is one best of all, but I feel like there's an accumulation of phenomenally good thrash guitarists, Gary Holt being one of them, but also Ol being another one, so having those two together was...
It's perfect, yeah.
So, I feel like the thing that poked out at me the most about the Old Drake album, other than the name, was it's the name of the songs, like Unveiling, guitarist playing guitars. They were brilliant. I love the names. The names popped out so much. But yeah, it's clearly an album where he just kind of let loose his, all the sort of the guitarist's sort of innate feeling of wanting to just shred. He kind of just got it all out there, and I get that, and that's cool. I know he had the name Old Drake for a while because I remember when they released Five Serpents Teeth. I know I'm going a bit further back, but it does relate to this. When I saw they did a sort of 6 sort of, and I was like 5 or 6 part videos of them recording the album, kind of similar to what they did with the DVD documentary for the other two. I remember watching it around about the time Five Serpents Teeth came out because I was kind of geared up for the album, so I thought it was a good way to kind of get introduced to it. Great, I do recommend anyone watching it because funny, and especially if you're into the album. But they had a shirt and I remember the saying "old rake," and I thought that was quite funny. And so I mentioned about it, and he said, and this was back in 2011, so he had the name for a while.
Mm.
So seeing it now actually in his project, I was quite like amused by that.
Yeah. I will say this about the album as well, like Old Rake. I mean, if the question is it good or bad? It's good. It's a good album. If you like guitarists going like widdly woo, then it's your thing. You're gonna love it. I will say some of it kind of felt like he had song ideas, but he knew, well, this would never work for Evile. But at the time, he wasn't a confident vocalist. He was just like, well, what can I do with these chord progressions I've got? I could just shred over it.
Yeah, I mean, I get it as well, because as a guitarist myself, I've done kind of similar things myself, especially with some demos I've released, kind of like, also, you know, I don't really see them as proper album songs, but just something I noodled with. And if you are into guitar type of music like that, I do have it as like demos for people to listen to. So I get the feeling that he had with it. So things he thought were not really more commercially available, but he thought he just get it out in his own solo, unique, for himself. It was very much an album for himself, and I get that, and I think he did well.
Yeah, I think it's cool. The artwork is certainly something, isn't it?
Yeah. Menacing, but also fun. I think he did some photo shoots for Spaceship Janitor too, where he's like in this sort of like sci-fi thing, and he's on the floor dressed as a janitor. And I was like, okay, that's all. I loved it.
I will say the last two tracks, the Rake Waltz, is incredible. I love how heavy and groovy it is, and the very last song, An Absence, which I have a feeling is about Mike. There's no drums, just nice guitar all the way through, and some cool. It reminds me of a lot of some of the stuff that like Buckethead would do.
Yeah, I agree.
It's shredding, but it's so full of emotion. You can sense there's a real sense of mourning. You know, you think a song like "Soothsayer" by Buckethead is about him losing someone in his family, right? And it's a very mournful song. I get the same feeling with An Absence by Old Rake.
That's actually a really good point. I never actually thought about it, but now you mention it, I actually think you all got on the point there. That's really cool. I already really. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think for me, my favourite. I don't know actually what my favourite was. I did like An Absence. I really like. I did like Spaceship Janitor. I'll be honest. I did like that one. I don't know how to feel about the last one he made as a bonus track. So there was a bonus track from as well, which was called T. At the very end, but that was a bit odd. It's hard to say though which one was actually favorite. I felt like it was listening to one long solo more than actual individual tracks sometimes. But again, it is literally that anyway. I feel.
Yeah, that's fair.